Hello, this is Franklin Wepner, once again making another video. This time it's a little bit different from the others. I got my rabbi outfit on here. I got my white shirt instead of my usual color t-shirts because I'm going to deal with some real Torah stuff here. Okay, I'm going to deal with the book of Exodus. This all the story about Passover and Moses and all that whole thing. And as usual, what I like to do is the proverb goes, a full step in where angels fear to tread, and here I go again. This is I could call this video Exodus Decoded dialectically, because there's already a video about Exodus Decoded archeologically, scientifically. I forgot, somebody with a long Polish name, I forgot what it is, begins with a J, made that. It's a very good video, by the way, I recommend you see it. But mine is in a sense the opposite of his. He's trying to make scientific sense out of the book of Exodus. And I'm making philosophical sense out of the book of Exodus. And of course, neither one of us is too much involved with the religious implications, you know, that the people are mostly praying this and praying for that and praying for this in relationship to that glorious story. I'm not getting into that religious aspect at all. I'm dealing with the thing philosophically. I don't know anybody in any source I've read that deals with what I'm going to do here. And I'm sure I'm not going to make... There'll be some people that who might have been friends up to now, but after this one they might not be. In a few words, my main point is that along with all the other elements of the Exodus story, along with the archeological, scientific side of it, along with the religious side of it, there's also a philosophical message that's being delivered here, as the way I interpret it. And my intention is to decode that message, and I'm amazed that I haven't seen anybody doing the same thing. Maybe they haven't, I just haven't read the book or haven't seen their video. All right, so in a few words I could say it very simply. In my philosophical jargon, Kabbalistic philosophical jargon, I could say that the way I interpret it, the Exodus story is an exodus, is a going out from something to something else, but the idea of going out from Egypt to going to the Promised Land is a subdivision of something even more basic, the way I understand it, and that is going out from one way of thinking to another way of thinking. So far so good. Everyone could say, well, okay, they went out from a slavery mentality to a free man's mentality. Okay. But now when I go further with that, some of you are going to start disagreeing. Now, the way I understand it, there are two major ways of thinking that are part of this overall tradition of dialectical thinking. First of all, what is dialectical thinking? In three words, it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's something, there's something or other, and then that something or other breaks up into all kinds of parts, fragments that are opposites somehow of that oneness at the beginning, and then finally the oneness or some other oneness comes along and encompasses all the opposites and puts it together into a one into the many, or the many into the one, or if you're religious, you could say God and the world, or the world and God. Or if you're a Hegelian philosopher, you can say identity and difference, or the difference in identity. There are many ways of saying it. So these are two ways of thinking. You start off with a something. Now, in the way I look at the Kabbalah, the Jewish tradition, we have the left side of the tree of life, we have the right side of the tree of life. And the left side of the tree of life is they talk about Bina and Din, for example. By the way, I'm not going to review everything I ever said in all my other videos. I'm going to assume that you know at least a certain amount, and if you get lost, I can't apologize for that. You need to do some homework maybe to get this one. All right, so we start off with the left side of the tree of life, where the emphasis is on distinctions, judgments. Din means judgment. All right, so and Bina is distinguishing, understanding, the usual interpretation anyway. And the other side of the tree of life is the more intuitive side. Chokhmah means wisdom, chesed, grace, usual translation. Those are more intuitive, fuzzy, emotional, encompassing, holistic ways of looking at things. So Chokhmah, the big idea, encompasses all the elements of the understanding, and the chesed, the grace, encompasses all the elements of the judgments. And then finally the middle pillar is where it all comes together in the synthesis, the one and the many and the one. So we have the left side symbolized by Yitzchak, Isaac, the right side symbolized by Abraham, and the middle column symbolized by Jacob, Yaakov. That's kind of the dialectical quick overview of the tree of life. And another technical word we can two words we need to throw in here. Philosophically speaking, the left side is an example, the way I understand it, at least to a certain extent here, for my purposes, of what we call deductive logic, deductions. You start off with one idea and you break it down into all its corollaries, ramifications. A classical example of that is God starts off to create the world, so let's see, I'll have a world here. Now in the world they're going to have all these opposites. There's day and night, there's animals and vegetables, there's endless. He breaks it all down into a gazillion things, and it takes him 6 days to do that. And then finally on the seventh day, Shabbat, Sabbath, he puts a kind of an overall view on that, brings in the other side, the intuitive, the right side, and then we have the one and the many. All the elements that have been created in the 6 days are now illuminated by this glorious oneness of peace, or whatever you want to call it. And we have Shabbat Shalom, peace on the Sabbath, the one and the many. Now what's the other side? If we can call it the left side, deductive logic, starting from the one to the many, well, we got to get back, if the cycle is going to be complete in the tree of life, we've got to go from the one to the many, and then from the many back to the one, except the new one is the next level up. It encompasses all the opposites that showed up in the cycle. That's a never-ending spiral that's from one cycle to the next cycle, to endless spiral of leading from the one, first of all, from the one to the many, and from the many back to the one. All right, that's dialectical thinking of the Kabbalah. All right, so the way back, now how do you come back? If you use rational deductive logic to get to break everything up, you got to have another way of getting back to the oneness. And you can't use rational logic to figure that one out, because it doesn't work. 2 and 2 equals 4, and there's no way to get out of that. Once you say 2 and 2 equals 4, you are trapped in the system of logical numbers. And the only way out of that is to just forget about numbers and logical numbers, and do some other kind of thinking. So what kind of other thinking is there? Well, if you know anything about my favorite game, Gestalt Therapy, then you know there's something called awareness. And you start off with, I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that, I see blueness over here, I see greenness over there, I see brownness over there, and I put that together and I call it, okay, now I'm seeing a rainbow of colors. I integrated these different awareness moments, and there's nothing logical that says if I start off with blue I'm going to get a rainbow, but just like there's nothing logical that says if I start off with my thumb I'm going to get a hand. I have to first experience each of the 5 fingers, and then if I want to think in terms of awareness, body awareness, well, let's see, that now I have a hand. And if I start thinking of the 2 hands, then 2 arms, then I got a body. So then we can work our way back from the many to the one using awareness thinking instead of rational thinking. And that's called inductive logic. In the history of science, a man that made that sort of stuff famous was Francis Bacon. I think it's around the 15th century, a Christian theologian, although I'm sure the stuff was around before he came along. And so we call it inductive thinking instead of deductive logic. Deductive, well, look at the root word. Dedus means to go, de is away from, and ducer is to lead. It leads away from the one to the many. And inductive, in means back to, and leads back into the one. Okay? So if we now put it together, we have the descending path on the left side of the tree of life. Let's see, that your left side would be my right side over here. So it goes down, passes through Bina, Din, gets down to Malchut, the world, and then starting back on the other side, well, if we like to think that things come together in some kind of a sort of rational way, well, then we're Aristotelians, and we're thinking about compromises and synthesis and an organic way of looking at everything as one big creature, one big living organism. And if we're Platonic thinkers, like, for example, the Breslovers versus the Chabad people in Judaism, then we want to make a big deal about the void that comes when the two opposites are so extreme. Then that opens up a big void, what they call a halal hapanui, an open void. It could be a fertile void if a person is functioning well. It could be an empty void, a barren void if the person is stuck in impasses. All right, and so that either route will take us back on the right side, so your right side is my left side, up to integrating awarenesses. So finally, we get to the oneness again, but it includes all the opposites we went through. So that's the idea of tzimtzum on the left, on the right. Your right side, my left side. Going up here, we have the void. Tzimtzum, the ego has to contract itself to allow an empty space, and into the empty space comes the new idea. So we have fertile void. All right, I'm introducing this now because later on I'm going to refer to this basic way of thinking as we go along. And my shtick here in this video is to take step by step the major elements of the Exodus story or history or whatever you want to call it, and illustrate how close the fit is. To me, it was amazing. I used to think of, for most of my life, I thought of this whole matzah trip on Passover as something for kids to answer the 4 questions, and for the religious people to get all excited and everything. But for me, it didn't matter much to me at all, frankly. I didn't even bother to take it seriously. Like last year, I didn't go to a Seder, I didn't go to a synagogue, I don't know what I did. But this year, it's much more of a big deal, because in the meantime, I just sat down one day and I just said to myself, now what do these words actually mean? If I had to go to I open up my Jastrow dictionary of Talmudic Hebrew, and my Alkali dictionary of contemporary Hebrew, and I look around and I see what the words actually mean. I was amazed. And that's where I got my shtick here. I was amazed. And now I'm going to start sharing some of that stuff with you. This might take one video, it might take a couple hours, I don't know. I'll just start at the beginning and keep going until I cover as much as I think I should cover and know how to cover. All right, so let's see now. First of all, maybe I should justify my case with 4 examples of how this Exodus story is an Exodus and it's illustrated in 4 major ways in the book of Shemot, the book of names, the book of going out of Egypt. So I'll start chronologically. Now we have or I'll just say what they are, just so you'll know what I'm going to talk about. Number 1, Moses sees a burning bush. You could say he goes out of his mind, or he goes out of his rational mind, but there he goes into the shifts from deductive to inductive logic, and I'll get to come back to that in a minute. Second of all, he goes to Pharaoh, and we have all the plagues and everything, and the people of Israel leave. They leave from being a situation to being mass man and involved in mass thinking, and they go off to being individual people, and thinking in terms of their here and now experiences. And we come up with a new idea of the Jewish people experiencing Sinai, the giving of the big idea, the big integrative idea. So it's in a sense it's an integrated process for the people, all of this, separate people coming out of Egypt. They become one people under one idea. They call it God, call it whatever you like, but there's a shift from the many to the one, and that's inductive thinking. So that's a second example of Exodus. That's the one most people are into. Now, a third example is, let's say once they're in the desert there, and they've got their Torah, the next thing that happens is somebody named Yitro comes along. And by the way, the word Yitro is an interesting word. Yetad, it means excess in English, in Hebrew. So what happens is, Yitro comes along and basically shifts from Aristotelian to a Platonic way of thinking. He shifts Moses from an Aristotelian philosopher to a Platonic philosopher. And let me illustrate that idea. Moses starts off in that particular chapter of the story as the judge of the people. He's the head of the group organism. He's like the mind of the group organisms, deciding this and deciding that, and guiding the people. He's like the heart or the mind of an organism. Comes along Yitro, who symbolizes excess, in other words, exploding the system. He explodes the system, just like when later on Moses hits the rock. He explodes the rock and fragments it, and this breaks up that system. And then the water, the new ideas come pouring out. Well, here are the same thing. Yitro tells Moses, look, you were meant for bigger stuff than just being some clerk here in the holy court. Let some other flunkies do that, and you go out there and be the prophet. Go separate yourself from the people, and you'll see what happens. Maybe it'll be a better trip for you, and it'll be better because then you'll be the intermediary, bring everything down from God, and let the smaller minds deal with the piddly stuff. So Moses, of course, loves that idea. So he gives up his job, has Aaron take over some of it, and he has the Kohanim, the priest, take over some of it, and some of the people take over some of it. And so he's off by himself. Again, we shift from a mass man, a system, a logical system in which Moses was simply part of that system. Now he's off by himself. He's an individual, a Ben Chorin, in touch with his own soul or something like that, and he's getting ideas. Platonically thinking, you could say he's now shifted out of the microcosm of everyday world, and he's in the macrocosm of the pure ideas in the mind of God. And so he takes it, goes up on Mount Sinai, and he actually becomes almost like an idea in the mind of God, somehow is receiving the stuff directly from God. Okay, that's third. So we have the example of Moses shifting from judge to prophet, as a third example of shifting from deductive logic, where he was stuck in the system, to inductive logic, where he's using his awareness, having enlightened experiences left and right, and bringing all that stuff down to the people who are still stuck in the microcosm. And Aaron is the intermediary there to give it over. All right, next, one last example in this miraculous philosophical textbook I'm reading here, and that is in one of the last chapters in, maybe it's the last one, I don't remember, Ki Sisa. We have this amazing little story about the tent meeting. Again, Moses and anyone else that wants to get in touch with really holy thinking has to go out from the camp. They go out from the camp, and they get to this tent where the Holy Torah is stashed away. And there, if they go into the tent, or if they somehow share Moses' enlightenment experiences in the tent, then they again can shift out of mass, deductive, systematic thinking into individual, more chaotic thinking. In Nachman of Breslov, if you're into that, Likutei Moharan, it's a shifting from what they call Hechrechi HaMetziut, from hechrechi hametziut, from what has to be, hechreach, what's got to be. Now, it's necessary reality, mitziut, or necessary finding, what you find necessarily, since everything is a big system, and you have to find these things. On the other hand, this other kind of thinking, inductive logic, is a efshari ha-mitziut, what Nachman of Breslov calls efshari ha-mitziut. Possible, all of efshari is possible. Possible finding, what you possibly might find if you just trip on reality instead of swallowing it whole as one big system. You discover things. Like, for example, I tripped on this book and I discovered all this stuff I'm telling you right now. I didn't plan that. I just started reading the book and thinking about it. And there it was, right there on the page in front of my nose, as long as I used the dictionary to get to it. All right, so there are 4 examples. Again, a review. Number 1, Moses leaves the path. Just like, by the way, in the Nachman of Breslov story about the lost princess, God's princess disappears, and the prince, that's like the Messiah, goes looking for her, and as long as he's on the road, he'll never find her, because he's stuck in the system. But the moment he goes off the road into the desert, just like Yitro went off the road of being a rational person to being a nomad in the desert, seeking the truth, he found it. He right away finds the missing princess, the Shekhinah, the others, the God's consort, whatever you want to look at it. Right there. It was there all the time, but because, as long as he was stuck in that rational thinking, he didn't find it. Okay, so again, starting with the first example, which Moses goes off the road, all right, finds the burning bush. He goes out of his mind, finds a burning bush. Next, the Jewish people go out of their mind. They do this crazy thing. They set off in the desert. And what do you know? They find the Jewish people. A new idea comes out of the void. Let's call ourselves the Jewish people instead of the Hyksos, whatever tribe was wandering around there. Let's call ourselves the Jews and relate to God and receive the Torah and all that stuff. Okay, third example. There are actually 5 examples. I just remembered another one. Let's see now. How did that fit in here? Yeah, I forgot. I left one out. Where was that? Okay, let's go. I left one out. Let's go back. Get this one. When Moses says to God, "Hey, look, how am I going to get these people to believe that you're God? You know, that I am your prophet, and how am I going to get them to follow me out of Egypt?" And God says, "Well, you're gonna give them a sign. The sign is that when they get to the Torah, to the Sinai there, they're going to find that they're going to get the Torah." And then so Rashi comments on this. And this is not in the Torah, but this, to my mind, shows how Rashi understood exactly what I'm talking about, even though apparently most people after him didn't pay much attention to it. But Rashi says, this will be a proof. He gives, let's say what he says here exactly. "For I promise you that when you bring them out of Egypt, they will serve me on this mountain by receiving the Torah upon it. This is the merit which stands by Israel." Rashi says, and this is the punchline here, we find a similar sentence structure, "and this will be a sign to you, that this year you will eat that which grew of itself." Okay, in case you, here it is in Hebrew, "V'hi ha-zechut ha-omedet v'Yisrael, v'dugmat lashon zeh matzinu, v'zeh lecha ha'ot." That is for you the sign. Achol hashana safiach. Achol hashana safiach. Now the word safiach, if you look in the Alkali dictionary, you find it means that which grows from itself. So Rashi goes on here and says, "The fall of Sanchiriv, mentioned earlier, will serve you as a sign for the fulfillment of another promise. For although your land is now barren of fruit, it will abundantly bless that which... For although your land is now barren of fruit, will abundantly bless that which grows of itself." Okay, now the land of Canaan is going to grow by itself once the Jews get there. Now what is it that grows by itself, logically speaking? How does that fit into what I'm trying to say about shifting from a deductive system where 2 and 2 equals 4 an inductive system where 2 and 2 could be anything, or 1 and 1 could be anything, well, we have the idea of the void. The two opposites, the two extremes. One says, I'm right, the other one says, I'm wrong. And then in the void, out of that, if somehow you go into the void there, in the fertile void, and open yourself to all kinds of associations, it could be, you get a vision of a lollipop or a butterfly. It could be anything. If you open yourself using Gestalt Therapy techniques with the 2 chairs, go back and forth, you get into the, close your eyes, go into the void, you find, you daydream, whatever, the process will lead you to anything. And that anything is an example of what they call in Gestalt Therapy the fertile void, or they call it the halal panui, the empty space. And that is what grows by itself. Inductive logic grows by itself, whereas deductive logic does not grow. It gets more and more stuck into impasses, either this or that, and there's no way out of it. You're stuck in the impasse. So there's a shift from deductive to inductive thinking, from being stuck in impasses to getting to the fertile void, that which grows by itself. And there it is right there, Rashi bringing that up, okay? Which to me tells me that Rashi knew what I'm talking about here, even though I haven't found one rabbi that mentions this at all. Although I have a lot of things I haven't read, of course. And so maybe I apologize if there's some 100 rabbis that know exactly what I'm talking about. But I've never heard any one of them say this. I didn't find it in Likutei Moharan. I didn't find it in the Tanya. But okay, maybe it's there. All right. So we have again starting that there. Going back. First of all, Moses goes off the road and finds the burning bush. Second of all, Moses asks God, what's your name? He tells him, yeah, I will be that which I will be, which is another way of talking about that which grows out of itself, the void. Whatever comes out of the void comes out of the void. There's no way of rationally anticipating and explaining that. That's the idea of the messianic now. The messianic now. So this idea of the messianic now is what grows out of itself, just being involved in the reality of the situation. Amazing things start happening. You start just getting ideas. All right, so that's the second one, that which grows of itself. The Hebrew is, again, Achol Hashana Safiyah. This year we're going to eat Safiyah. We're going to eat what grows by itself. Okay? And by the way, that doesn't... If you think about chometz grows by itself, and matzah doesn't grow by itself because it's got a lot less yeast in it. So I don't know how you're going to reconcile chometz. In that sense, chometz would need to be a symbol of the Passover instead of the matzah. But if you can figure out that one, you're a better dialectician than I am. Anyway, so the second one is the what grows by itself, the fertile void. The third one is Am Yisrael, Jewish people going out of the system of rational thinking that everybody in Egypt is supposedly stuck in, and according to this Jewish legend here. And getting into the Torah thinking, the inductive logic, and discovering the big idea that comes out of the void, which is Sinai, the Torah, you might say. And then the next one is, let's see, there are 4. That's 3. That is Egypt. Then the tent of meeting. Okay, once they have then the tent of meeting. Once they are a people, then they have this tent of meeting. The fourth one was Moses shifting from under Yitro's Platonic. Yitro comes along as a Platonic philosopher, and he finds Moses stuck being in an Aristotelian way of thinking as the judge of an organism here, the mind of this organism, and he talks him into being a Platonic thinker and thinking in terms of the macrocosm and the microcosm, and he gets Moses to leave the microcosm and go into the macrocosm. So that's the fourth one. And Moses becomes the prophet that brings down the Torah, because he's got a creative way of thinking, and he's not looked into previous ways of thinking. And then finally we have the tent of meeting, where anyone is in the village is invited to become another Moses just by going to the tent of meeting. and leaving your rational deductive mind behind and going into the tent and getting exposed to some of that holy light and becoming another Platonic mystic, Neoplatonic mystic like Moses is. Okay, now I'm not saying that Moses and all these guys were studying Greek philosophy. I'm not saying that at all. 2,500 years ago. But I am saying that to me it's amazing when I look at this stuff that was originally written supposedly 2,500 years ago and then commented on by Rashi another 1,500 years after that or something, you know, that we find all this stuff loaded into it in such a basic, simple way, just like the same dialectical logic is loaded into most any other world-class religion if you go into it, you know, whatever the religion is. So I'm not saying, you know, that these guys did it all purposely, that Moses copied the Greeks or the Greeks copied Moses. I'm just amazed to see all this stuff right here in the same old text, the same 21st century thinking that you find in Gestalt Therapy and some of the other things these days, with people that are trying to live in the here and now, the Messianic now. And here it is, the Messianic now from 2,500 years ago, that they're Messianic now. Somehow they knew about it. There are too many coincidences. It's impossible, in my mind, that all this stuff could be right here in this old story here. So the way I understand the book of Exodus, looking at all that, is an overview. If I take on the one hand this guy that made the video Exodus Decoded, and I take my video here now of Exodus Decoded dialectically, I think they're just simply two elements, or maybe many other elements, of course, that were put together over the years by lots of wise men and who wanted some kind of a storyline that could grab the imagination of people. And on the other hand, there's a certain amount of archeological evidence that some of this stuff did happen. You know, in that video he talks about some kind of a big earthquake, and all this stuff could somehow be the result of that big earthquake and all the other stuff that follows from earthquakes. All right. And then the religious people come along with all their fables and the fables about fables about fables. And so you have this huge cultural package here, which is sitting there in our tradition. And anyone that wants wisdom certainly could find plenty of interesting stuff here in this Exodus story. And people, when I just moved to Tel Aviv from Tzfat, and here I am walking around what they call Sin City. You don't find too many people wearing this Sunday costume here, Saturday Shabbat costume on a Shabbat here. They just passed a new law that says that they can keep the stores open on Shabbat. You know, the grocery stores, the liquor stores. So you walk around Tel Aviv and you find lots of liquor stores open on. You find lots of loud rock music on Tel Aviv on the Sabbath. Let's hope we get through this video before I get bombarded here in my studio with some of that noise. So you can ignore this whole Pesach story here, or like me, you can take it seriously only after you find something personal you can relate to in it. So in my case, I found this interesting dialectical foundation that ties in with my work with Gestalt Therapy and healing people, and it's just another example of the same kind of dialectical thinking, going from mass man stuck in games and manipulations, patterns and habits that we learn, to being more of an individual free thinker and having your own access to your own intuition, your own, we could call it macrocosm, your own world of pure ideas. Okay, so I found it that way. I have some kind of meaningful experience of the Passover. Whether I'm going to get involved in a Seder this year, I don't know. Right now it's about a week and a half before Passover. I'll see what I'll do when it happens. Right now I'm neutral. Okay, so that's my first point here. Now let's see, I've got another 25 minutes on this tape here. What can I do? I want to go back and go back and say some more about some of these things here. I have two levels here. I've got a summary sheet here. And then I've got a whole bunch of more specific details. Now, first of all, I'll look at my summary sheet and see how much of that I've covered already. I've covered a lot of it just by some freewheeling thinking here. Let's see, on page, in this version, 219, this is the Mitsuda version of the Bible, 219. Okay, it's Rashi again, a good example of how Rashi was in touch with so many of these things. Talking about the staff. You're going to strike the staff and the water will come out of it and the people will be able to drink. Now, the way I understand the staff metaphor, the staff, the way it's used so many times in this Moses staff, is a symbol of this dialectical logic here. When it's straight, the logic is healthy. When it's kinky, when it becomes a snake, then the logic is twisted. And the perfect example, a parallel to that, is in Gestalt Therapy. When a person is being real, authentic, and game-free to a certain extent, that person, it's like Moses holding out his hand, holding out the rod. It's interesting. I wonder if Hitler had any idea what he was doing when he held out his hand like that. But when Moses holds out his hand, it symbolizes the dialectic in a pure, very pure state of pure ideas flowing through the organism. And so here, when they're fighting, let's see, the people are being tested, Moses, Amalek. Okay, so when he holds out his hand, the Jews win, and when he puts his hand down, the Jews become corrupt and the Amalek wins. That's one example. And then using that staff to strike on the rock. That's a good example. Now the rock, sur, the word sur in Hebrew, if you look in the alkali dictionary, not the alkali, you look in the Jastro, the Talmudic dictionary, a related word to sur is tzara. Tzara. What is tzara? Has the association to bundle. So in that sense, a rock is a bundle of something. Now what's it a bundle of? If we think of our experiences, and we know something about Gestalt Therapy, and I'm not going to go back and explain everything about Gestalt Therapy here, but the basic idea of a Gestalt is a moment of awareness. So we have strong Gestalts and we have weak Gestalts. A strong Gestalt, if we're on an integrative ascending pathway on the right side of the tree of life, is integrating a whole bunch of weak Gestalts. Somebody works 3 hours on a dream with personal relationships and everything. At the end, they get to some kind of a big existential message of a dream. That's a solid, something solid. Word of God. And it came from starting off with just I'm aware of this and aware of that at the very beginning of the 3-hour session. So that's an example of bundling, making a bundle of experiences as another code word for talking about inductive logic. All right? So where was I going to get to that? So this rock here that Moses hits with that stick, he's hitting, the rock symbolizes this whole bundle of, in my way of thinking anyway, the rock symbolizes this whole world of contactful experiences that make up a person's reality. And when Moses, or the inner Moses, comes along, it hits it with the rock, it hits it with the pure way of thinking that's symbolized by this dialectical logic. Then it opens up. That opens up the whole system. The dialectical process begins to flow. The void opens up, and the new ideas come pouring out of the void, or come pouring down from the macrocosm into the microcosm. So in the life, everyone can drink. Everyone can drink new ideas from this in the desert instead of being in the desert. Now they got a whole source of wonderful stuff to drink. And water, of course, in the Kabbalah is a major symbol of the flow of heavenly juices from, you know, there's alchemy, you have water going to earth, going to air, going to fire. And so the beginning is the water that comes trickling down, the pure ideas, what Nachman calls, where the prophets suckle, the pure ideas coming down from heaven, from the microcosm. So again, Moses hits that and hits with his pure way of thinking. He hits the rock, and the rock, opens up, becomes a pure rock, a pure bundle instead of a polluted bundle. Now another thing, we need to go back and get the word, fill in here some of the blanks here. The word Moses, by the way, in our story, it's not just, after all I've said, it's impossible to just ignore the fact that the word Moses means awareness. Moses. There are several related Hebrew roots. There's lamush, there's lamashmesh. There are several related words there. The word masha, those two letters symbolize touching. Could also mean taking out of, going out of Egypt, for example. But the most basic meaning of the word Moses is to touch. Some tangible contact experience with reality, which is exactly what awareness is. So Moses in our story here symbolizes awareness. And of course, the bad guy in the story is Pharaoh. And what does Pharaoh symbolize? Let's see, I've got it somewhere here. Pharaoh symbolizes, well, first of all, Egypt as a whole symbolizes the state of mass man stuck in the matrix of systematic thinking, deductive logic. And Pharaoh is an example of a person that's, let's see, here we have it right here. Pasach al shtei se'ipim. Pasach al shtei se'ipim. And there's the word Pesach right there, Passover built into that one. And what does it mean? He's going back and forth between two opposites. I should let him go, I shouldn't let him go. When I shouldn't let him go, I shouldn't let him go. And because he's in that impasse, and then because Moses symbolizes, because Pharaoh symbolizes deductive logic reaching its ultimate absurd impasse stage there, and Moses represents the pure ideas of awareness coming down, the new strong gestalts coming out of the void. So it's obvious that what we have to happen next is that this Pharaoh, who symbolizes the negation of the oneness, and Moses, who symbolizes the oneness, we have to get the negation of the negation, and so Pharaoh has to be eliminated completely, all his troops and all his horses and everything. Here's the sentence here in Hebrew: Pasach al shtei se'ipim velo omer lo. Velo amor pula. Lo amor lifol. So Pharaoh is stuck between the two sides of the two seif branches, stuck between two opposite branches, and because of that he can't find omer, which is the intention, the word, can't get himself ready, lifol, to act. He's stuck. He's a perfect example of what they call a neurotic in psychology, Gestalt Therapy. We talk about self-interruptions, how a person with all their games and manipulations interrupts their awareness, their awareness and their action. So Pharaoh represents exactly that. And the word Pharaoh, what does it mean? Literally, nifra min. Nifra min. It means he is revenged. He's called to account. So, in a sense, the oneness here sees what the manyness here has taken over. The thesis looks at the antithesis. God looks down from the world, looks at Egypt as the symbol of Egypt here as an example of fragmented thinking rather than organic, integrated thinking here. And says to himself, just like with Noah, the story of Noah, okay, I'm going to eliminate this people here. And he negates that negation. Moses comes along as the vehicle, the vessel that embodies the inductive logic and negates the deductive logic. All right? Right there, built into the text. It's in the words. And let's see, how to actually, there's a very nifty little symbolism here. The idea that all night long there's a wind coming from the east. While this Ruach Kadim, with which God is punishing Pharaoh. The east wind has shattered him in the heart of the seas. Torah precedes creation. These are all basic ideas. It's also Aristotle. Actuality precedes potentiality, is prior to potentiality. That the action itself, which is what the Jews are symbolizing here, because they're not neurotics who are interrupting their action. That real action that the Jews are doing is more basic than the potential action. It's the stuckness, the opposites, the impasses that Pharaoh and the Egyptians here represent, logically speaking. And since that's the case, this overall action that the Jews are symbolizing here is vast, so vast it encompasses and negates all the negations that are symbolized by the whole idea of Egypt in this case. But it doesn't not necessarily limit it to Egypt. It's any action. You know, for example, my decision to make this video today, that was an action, a risk. I didn't know if I could do it or not, and I still won't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm doing it. And that action, somehow or other, that decision, actuality, that reality, preceded all the struggling. Here I am looking for this, maybe I should say it that way, maybe I should say it that way. All of these potentiality things that are here in the flooding, swishing around in my mind here, they're all somehow subservient to that actuality of making a decision to do something. All right? And the same thing here. So any moment in our lives where we make a decision to do something, I'm going to go to the ball game, okay. And then everything that stands in the way of going to the ball game gets somehow encompassed in the big idea of getting to the ball game, and you get to the ball game, or you don't get to the ball game somehow or other. But the basic principle is that a person that makes a committed action which is grounded in reality, like the Jews here, since Moses symbolizes reality, and the Jews are grounded in reality and the Egyptians are not, therefore the Jews have to win. The whole thing is set up from the beginning, and the Egyptians logically don't have a chance. Okay? All right. So you see that. Again, shows how this nifty logical thinking here is so woven into this, the fabric of this story here, you know, that it's got to be a bestseller for all these years. Because it's so well put together. All right, there's another example. So we covered Moses, what he means. There's another little example here. Say Moses is equal to the whole Torah. That's right here in the text somewhere. Sure, because Moses symbolizes inductive logic, and he symbolizes the whole Torah, whereas the Egyptians here symbolizes just part of the Torah, the stuck part, the impasses, the antithesis. All right. Again, I'll be made tangible. I will be made tangible through Pharaoh. V'id kabda b'Pharaoh. God will be made tangible. So God has to harden the heart of Pharaoh. Has to make Pharaoh a symbol of split thinking, going back and forth with mixed up like that, in order to have the dialectic work. So if God didn't harden the heart of Pharaoh, the whole story wouldn't work. It has to be. Logically speaking, it has to be. He has to find some way to justify. So he simply has these plagues and all this stuff to get. Originally, remember, Pharaoh was toleh. His word says toleh here. Shehaya toleh im lirdov im lav. That Pharaoh originally was suspended. I didn't know, should I chase after them? I shouldn't chase after them. So God gave a whole bunch of plagues here and all this stuff to make sure that Pharaoh, if Pharaoh was suspended and actually in touch with reality, making sense of the whole situation, then the whole story wouldn't work. He wouldn't be the bad guy. He wouldn't be the symbol of deductive thinking. He had to be he had to be that. We had to harden his heart. Otherwise the story wouldn't work. Another one. I'm running out of time here. I can't say it all, but I'll say a little more. We have this wonderful example that ties in right from Gestalt Therapy thinking of, and Moses sang. So first of all these things happen. The story happens. And at the end, we have Moses and everybody else looking back. Wow, wasn't that a wonderful thing just happened? Look at that. This Pharaoh this happened, that happened, and we won. You know, it's wonderful. The good prevailed. Now, that's exactly what happens in Gestalt Therapy. A person, so you might say this whole Exodus story is an example of one person's, Moses, if there was a guy named Moses, having a Gestalt session with some local wise man or something or other, a medicine man. So, because if he symbolizes the whole dialectic and he goes through this whole process, so at the end Moses looks back. And what happens in Gestalt Therapy? A person works 3 hours on relationships with his father, mother, with his dog, with heaven, with grasshoppers, anything. At the end of the 3 hours, person gets an existential message, a dream. Oh, I realized that I should be better, more connected to people. I shouldn't be such a loner. All right. In fact, that's actually that's the message that this woman, Belle Baca, if you ever took my video about awareness work with Belle, that's the message she got. I should be more in touch with people. So she looked back with the wisdom of hindsight over her 2-hour work on awareness there and came to that conclusion. That was the existential message or word of God that came from all these opposites that she worked through to get to that moment. All right? The same thing here. The Jewish people symbolize, and this whole story with Pharaoh symbolizes an ongoing dialectical process, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, intensifying until they get to the void, and then from the void comes through the new idea. Out of the void comes, on Sinai comes the new idea of a Jewish people to replace the fragmented idea of a bunch of Hittite farmers running around. Hyksos, I think they were called, that tribe. The same people got transformed into a one organic, living, vital, pure idea here. And looking back, so that's what Moses looks back and he sings. That's exactly what happens at the end of a Gestalt session. A person explodes a lot of times into, could be authentic grief, authentic joy, authentic orgasm, could be anger. Those are the 4 major kinds of explosions, and that's Moses, the dialectic exploding there at the end into the authentic action that's now been completed, and a person is able to look back at all the events that happened in that 40 years or in that 3 hours or whatever it is, and see the organic connection, how everything is part of one big action, one big pure idea, and that by doing that, then all those little experiences along the way, all of those previously, which had been dead, what they call dead forms, opposites, stuck here, stuck there, and nothing's living and nothing's moving, all of a sudden become illuminated by this wonderful new idea that the action is completed now, and I look back and I see how all of those things were necessary to lead up to this moment. You know, person gets the end of his life, you know, and look at, maybe let's say he has this all kinds of horrible experiences. At the end of his life, he maybe has a magical moment where he somehow or other, even though he's dying from this and that and the other thing, he might find some kind of peace, maybe from some kind of experience, and be able to look back and find meaning in his life, and go to his death with some kind of feeling that my life has had some kind of meaning, you know. Okay, so I have an association to myself making all these all these nutty videos. Maybe somebody will look at them and say, hey, that guy did something. Or at least I can look back at my own life anyway, and look at my own 321 videos and say, hey, maybe I did something after all, you know? Okay, so that's the power of this kind of looking hindsight, this power of dialectical thinking to give meaning to a life. Of course, that's also potentially very dangerous. A person like Marx or Hitler can use that kind of overall dialectical process to justify just about doing anything to anybody and call that part of the truth search, you know. So it's a double-edged sword, dialectical thinking. But the main point, I guess, that I'm making here is that the Torah story, the Exodus story, is a wonderful example of how, you might say, what they call the power of positive thinking, how this dialectical truth search is built right into the metaphors of the story. And the fact that Moses bursts into a song at the end is a lovely ending for the story, the book of Shemot. Looking back and basically rehashing the whole thing, but from the point of view now looking at these what were harrowing experiences as part of the truth search and giving them meaning in terms of the final realization of truth that came out of it. And this is now that the Jewish people is an accomplished fact, and looking back to the Passover, so we can look back. But also, we do the same thing. We look back and as though we also vicariously found meaning through that experience, and some people do and some people don't. Okay, but there it is. The elements are built into the text here to have that kind of flashback experiences. If you in your own life, of course, have done your homework and you are ready for that kind of a point of view. Of course, if you're a neurotic, stuck in your own trip, and you're in your own impasses, and you're not doing your own homework and finding your own way out of your own Egypt, then of course that's not going to be obvious to you. Then you'll just do it by rote and be another dead body at the Seder table, just gobbling down your grub. Okay? All right, that's it. So much for my Passover story for now. Okay. Bye-bye. Oh, Chag Sameach. Happy holiday.